My name's Fary. I'm 27 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my family has treated me like I'm less ambitious than my older brother, less glamorous than my cousins, less worthy of praise from my parents. On the outside, people would say I was the quiet one, the girl who avoided arguments, kept her head down, and did what was asked of her. I wasn't the straight-A genius like my brother Zion. I wasn't the polished social butterfly like my cousin Amara. I was just me, simple, soft-spoken, invisible. But what no one ever bothered to see was that my silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. See, my parents grew up believing respect was measured in money, power, and appearances. My father is a lawyer, my mother a doctor. They thrive in competition. Their love language is achievements, and since I wasn't waving degrees in their face every year, they decided I didn't measure up. Why don't you dress like Amara? When are you going to get serious about your career, Fary? Zion just bought a new car. When will you finally do something that makes us proud? It was always comparisons, always backhanded comments, and the worst part? I let them do it. I stayed quiet, let the words sting, and carried the weight alone. The truth is, I had built a life they knew nothing about. I'd chosen a path outside their rigid mold, one that demanded sacrifice, discipline, and, above all, secrecy. And though it wasn't the kind of success they paraded at dinner parties, it was real, it was hard-won. The only person who ever truly saw me was Grandpa. He'd squeeze my hand at family dinners, lean in, and whisper, "Don't let them crush your spirit, Fary. You're stronger than they'll ever admit." He was the only one who knew the truth about me, the only one I trusted with it. And when he passed, something inside me cracked. Not just grief, but fear. Fear that without him, I'd drown completely in their constant dismissal. So when the inheritance dispute came up and we all ended up in court, I already knew what was coming. Zion and my parents saw it as their chance to strip away the last piece of dignity I had left. They were sure I'd fold. But they had no idea who they were really dealing with. The weeks leading up to the court date were brutal. My parents treated me like I was an intruder in my own family, their voices sharp with frustration. "Don't embarrass us in front of the judge, Fary," my mother snapped over the phone one night. "Just sign what your brother is offering. It's fair." "Fair?" I whispered, my hand tightening on the receiver. "He's taking everything Grandpa wanted me to have." My father's voice thundered in the background. "Your brother deserves it. He's responsible. He'll use it properly. You'd waste it." The words lodged in my throat like glass. Waste it. That's all they thought I was capable of. At dinner a week later, Zion leaned back in his chair, smug as ever, swirling his wine. "You really want to drag this to court, Fary? You think anyone will believe you? I've got Dad's firm behind me. What do you have?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him everything, to throw the truth in his face, but instead, I stared at the tablecloth, forcing myself to breathe. Grandpa's voice echoed in my head, "Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's waiting for the right moment to speak." And so I waited. But the tension grew unbearable. My relatives whispered behind my back, calling me greedy, ungrateful, delusional. Even my cousins stopped talking to me, choosing Zion's side. By the morning of the trial, I felt like a lamb being led to slaughter. My parents were dressed immaculately, standing beside Zion like a united front. Their smiles were sharp, confident, like the outcome was already written. I walked in alone, my heels echoing on the marble floor, clutching the folder of documents Grandpa had left me. My stomach was a knot, my palms slick. And then I saw the judge step in. He was older, stern, commanding the room without saying a word, the kind of man my father would normally boast about knowing. But when his eyes found mine, something flickered there. Recognition, respect. My breath caught. Because in that instant, I realized he knew who I was, not the failure my family painted me as, not the pushover they mocked. He knew the other me. And the courtroom would never be the same again. The air in the courtroom was heavy, like a storm pressing down on my chest. I sat at the defendant's table, my folder in front of me, trying to keep my hands steady. Across from me, Zion lounged in his seat like he already owned the world. My parents sat right behind him, their faces smug, confident, Rehearsed. The case wasn't about millions, it was about legacy. Grandpa had set aside a portion of his estate specifically for me, a farm he had loved. Land he said was for the granddaughter who actually listens. Zion wanted it. Of course, he wanted everything, and my parents were helping him twist the will in his favor. The lawyer, my father's colleague, stood up first. His voice carried easily, polished and rehearsed. Your Honor, the family requests that this land be transferred to Mr. Zion, who has the financial capability, education, and stability to manage it. Ms. Fary, while we love her dearly, is, let's say, not in a position to handle such responsibility. I felt my throat tighten, my nails dug crescents into my palm. Not in a position. That was their entire narrative of me, boiled down into a single sentence. The judge's gaze flicked toward me, unreadable. Ms. Fary, do you have representation? I stood slowly, my voice soft but steady. I'll represent myself, Your Honor. There were gasps behind me. My mother's hiss carried across the room. Fary, don't make a fool of yourself. But I ignored her. I opened the folder Grandpa had left me. The papers inside weren't just about property. They were letters, his handwriting, careful and strong, pages addressed to me, talking about why he chose me, about how I was the only one who visited him regularly, who cared about the farm, who saw value beyond money. I held them up. This isn't just land. This is Grandpa's voice, his choice, and I won't let anyone erase it. My voice shook, but I didn't sit down. That was the first time the courtroom shifted, not because of what I said, but because of how the judge looked at me, like he already knew this wasn't the whole story, like he was waiting for me to reveal the part no one else saw coming. The lawyer smirked. With all due respect, Ms. Fary, handwritten notes aren't legally binding. Sentiment doesn't hold in a court of law. I swallowed hard. Maybe not, but honesty does. Zion leaned forward, unable to contain himself. Honesty? He let out a cruel laugh. Fary, you've been a burden your whole life. You can't hold a job for more than a few months. You hide in your apartment. You've never done anything to prove yourself. Why should anyone trust you with something important? The words hit like stones. For a second, I thought I might crumble under the weight of them. But then I remembered the nights on Grandpa's porch, the way he'd squeeze my hand and whisper, "You're stronger than you think." I straightened my shoulders, because unlike you, Zion, I don't measure worth by how loud I can talk or how many people I can bully into agreeing with me. The room went dead silent. My mother shot up from her seat. Fary, enough. Stop humiliating us. You're making this worse. My father's jaw clenched, his face flushed with anger. You're ungrateful. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? My voice cracked. Years of swallowed pain rising to the surface. You mean comparing me to Zion every single day? Calling me weak? Pretending I didn't exist unless it was convenient? That's not love. That's control. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge's hand tapped the desk lightly, silencing everyone. His eyes stayed fixed on me, sharper now, almost searching, like he was weighing me against something he already knew. And that's when I realized he wasn't just a judge. He knew. Not just about Grandpa's will, not just about my family's cruelty, he knew me. And once the truth came out, nothing in that courtroom or in my family would ever be the same. The judge leaned forward slightly, adjusting his glasses. Ms. Fary, he said slowly, do you have any further evidence you wish to present to this court? My heart pounded so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. This was the moment I had been holding on to. The one piece of truth I had sworn I'd only use if my family forced my hand. I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Zion rolled his eyes so hard it was almost theatrical. What now? Fary? More love letters from Grandpa? Maybe a diary entry saying you were his favorite? His laugh dripped with arrogance, but there was a thin thread of unease in his voice that hadn't been there before. I opened my bag and pulled out a smaller folder, sealed with an official emblem. The metal clip gleamed under the courtroom lights. My father squinted at it, his face blanching. He recognized it. Where did you? He started, but his voice cracked. I didn't look at him. Instead, I addressed the judge. These are service documents, Your Honor. They verify my rank and assignments. They also include letters of commendation and records of classified operations that I was part of. The entire courtroom stiffened. A murmur rippled through the benches. The judge's face remained neutral, but his eyes softened, almost imperceptibly. He gave a slow nod, like pieces of a puzzle were clicking into place. "You served?" he asked, his tone formal but laced with something deeper. I straightened my shoulders. "Yes, sir, I did, and I still do." The room erupted. My mother gasped loudly, clutching her chest as if I had physically struck her. My father's jaw dropped, his lawyer mask slipping for the first time in years. "And Zion?" He sat frozen, mouth hanging open, the smug confidence wiped clean from his face. The judge lifted a hand, commanding silence. "I am aware of Ms. Fary's record," he said gravely, "and I can personally attest to the character and discipline she has demonstrated in service." That's when it happened. He stood. The sound of his chair scraping back echoed like thunder. He adjusted his robe, squared his shoulders, and then, before the stunned eyes of my entire family, he saluted me. The courtroom gasped. My vision blurred as tears stung my eyes. For the first time in my life, in front of the very people who had spent years calling me weak, powerless, invisible, I was being recognized, publicly. And it wasn't just recognition, it was respect. The silence that followed was deafening. My parents looked like statues, frozen mid-breath. Zion blinked rapidly, as if trying to convince himself this was some sort of bizarre dream. I could almost hear their thoughts unraveling. This isn't possible. Not Fary. Not her. My mother was the first to crack. She stood abruptly, her voice shaking. This must be a mistake. Fary can't, she couldn't possibly." The judge's gaze cut to her, and she faltered, sinking back into her seat. I lifted my chin. "You never asked where I disappeared for months. You never cared why I came back quieter, different, more disciplined. You were too busy comparing me to Zion to notice that I was building something bigger than your approval." Zion finally found his voice. You're lying." But the tremor in his tone betrayed him. "Am I?" I asked softly, holding up the documents again. "Do you think the judge would salute a liar? Do you think I'd risk federal punishment by faking these records?" His face flushed crimson. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For once in my life, I wasn't the one on the defensive. I wasn't the one scrambling to prove my worth. They were. The lawyer cleared his throat nervously. "Your Honor, surely this doesn't change the legal matter of." "It changes everything," the judge interrupted firmly, his voice echoing through the room. "Character matters, intent matters, and so does respect for the deceased's wishes. Mr. Zion, I suggest you sit quietly before you further embarrass yourself." The humiliation on my brother's face was like a physical blow to him. His lips pressed into a thin line, his fists clenched against the table. My parents avoided my gaze completely, their heads bowed, their power crumbling in real time. For years, I had been the shadow in their story, the afterthought, the failure. But now, the entire narrative had shifted. And for the first time, I wasn't just defending myself, I was standing in my own light, and they couldn't dim it anymore. The silence in the courtroom was almost unbearable, thick, suffocating, electric. My brother's face had drained of all color. My mother looked like she was holding back a scream, and my father's lawyer mask was shattered into disbelief. But me? For the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt steady, like the ground beneath me had finally stopped shaking. The judge cleared his throat. "This court recognizes Ms. Fary's testimony, service record, and the documents provided. They will be entered into evidence." His words landed with the weight of a gavel, even before he lifted it. My parents instantly leaned into each other, whispering frantically. I caught pieces of it. "She tricked us. Why didn't we know? This ruins everything." Zion, on the other hand, slammed his fist against the table. "This isn't fair." His voice cracked, echoing off the wooden walls. "She's playing some kind of game. She doesn't deserve this. She never has." "Sit down, Mr. Zion," the judge commanded. But he didn't. He turned on me, his eyes wild, his voice dripping venom. "You think this changes anything, Fary? You've always been weak. You'll always be weak. No piece of paper or salute will change that. For a moment, the words tried to sink into me like they always had. The years of insults, dismissals, and comparisons, it all pressed against my chest. But then I looked around. The rows of strangers watching, the judge standing tall beside me, the documents in my hands. And I realized something: I didn't need his validation anymore. I met his glare, calm and unflinching. The difference between us, Zion, is that I don't need to tear others down to feel strong. My strength stands on its own. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My parents buried their faces in their hands. Zion faltered, as if the words had finally pierced the armor he'd worn his whole life. And for the first time, he looked small. The judge let the silence linger before finally speaking. It is clear to this court that Mr. Zion, with the support of his parents, attempted to override the explicit wishes of the deceased. Such actions reflect poorly not only on your claim but on your character. My brother's jaw tightened. He muttered something under his breath, but the judge cut him off. Enough. This is not a playground for ego. This is a court of law. I couldn't help it. I exhaled, shaky, like I'd been holding my breath for years. The lawyer made one last attempt, desperation seeping into his voice. Your Honor, regardless of her military service, surely it is more practical for Mr. Zion, educated, financially secure, to oversee the land. Ms. Fary's commitments may prevent her from maintaining it properly. It was a clever angle, I'll admit. The lawyer had always known how to twist things. For a second, my chest tightened. What if they used my service against me? What if the very thing that gave me strength cost me Grandpa's final gift? But before I could speak, the judge's gavel struck once. No, practicality does not outweigh intent. This land was chosen for Ms. Fary, and she has demonstrated not only her capacity but her integrity. I will not strip her of what was clearly meant to be hers. The words thundered through the courtroom. My mother's quiet sob cracked the silence. My father leaned forward, face buried in his hands. Zion's entire body stiffened like stone, his fists trembling against the table. He wasn't just losing the case, he was losing the illusion of superiority he'd clung to his entire life. I held my breath, my heart pounding, waiting for the final judgment. Because I knew this wasn't just about land anymore. This was about me finally being seen, about proving, once and for all, that the girl they thought was powerless had been powerful all along. And I was ready for the final blow. The gavel struck again, sharp and final. This court rules in favor of Ms. Fary, the judge declared. His voice carried through the chamber like a hammer splitting stone. The farm and the estate left by the late Mr. Rahim shall remain under her ownership, as was his wish. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The words didn't even feel real, like I'd dreamed them 1,000 times, but never thought I'd live to hear them. Behind me, my mother let out a soft, strangled cry. My father slumped back in his chair, shaking his head like the world had tilted off its axis. And Zion, my brother, looked hollow, his fists clenched, his face red, his mouth opening and closing but no sound coming out. The judge didn't stop there. He turned his stern gaze on my family. This court does not take kindly to manipulation or attempts to override the wishes of the deceased. Your arrogance nearly cost this family its honor. You should reflect on that. That was it, the final nail. The courtroom shifted as whispers filled the air, strangers leaning toward each other, eyes darting between me and my family. My parents, once so proud, so certain, couldn't even look at me. For years they had paraded Zion as their golden child, their perfect son, while I was their disappointment. Now the entire world had seen what they tried to bury. The judge gathered his papers, then did something I'll never forget. Before stepping out, he turned back toward me. His gaze softened, just for a heartbeat. Then, once more, he gave me that salute. The respect in that moment was louder than every cruel word my family had ever spoken. I felt my throat tighten, but I managed a nod in return. My vision blurred, not from shame this time, but from something new: relief, vindication. I had won. Not just the case, not just the land, I had won back myself. Afterward, outside the courthouse, I stood on the steps, the cool air brushing against my face. Reporters murmured, Relatives whispered, and people stared at me like they were seeing me for the first time, but all I saw were the ghosts of every moment my family had called me weak, invisible, unworthy. And I realized something: I didn't need their approval anymore. I never did. My mother tried to approach me once, her eyes red. Fary, we didn't know. I looked at her, my heart heavy but clear. You never asked. She flinched, as if the truth stung worse than any insult. I walked away without waiting for more, not out of spite, but because I finally understood I didn't have to beg for love that was never freely given. That night, I drove out to the farm. The land stretched wide under the setting sun, golden fields swaying like waves. I walked through it, breathing it in, feeling Grandpa everywhere. His words echoed in my mind: don't let them crush your spirit. You're stronger than they'll ever admit. For the first time, I believed him. The farm wasn't just property, it was proof. Proof that quiet doesn't mean weak, that being underestimated isn't the same as being powerless, and that strength doesn't always roar, it sometimes waits for the right moment to stand tall. The lesson? Never let anyone else define your worth. People will mock, belittle, and underestimate you because it's easier than facing their own insecurities. But when the time comes to rise so fully that they can never look at you the same way again. I went into that courtroom as the forgotten daughter, the quiet sister, the family disappointment. I walked out as myself, finally, unapologetically seen. And for me, that was the greatest victory of all.